Hi everyone, and thank you for joining 60 Hour Shakespeare's live interview with Hugh Ross, part of our education series. Hopefully there's some familiar faces that might have been in our sessions that we had during COVID, but also some new ones joining us this evening. It's my absolute pleasure and to introduce and also to personally thank actor and director Hugh Ross for joining us this evening. Hugh has had a long and distinguished career in theatre, film, radio and television. It's been extremely varied, spanning TV, including Outlander, Poirot, Ab Fab, Midsummer Murders and Sharp Sword. His films have included The Patriot Games, Charlotte Gray and The Iron Lady. And his theatre includes Hamlet with John Simm, Twelfth Night and Macbeth with James McAvoy. On top of that, his production company, The Other Cheek, in association with Cahoot's Theatre Company, recently presented a revival of J.B. Priestley's The Roundabout, which Hugh directed at Park Theatre in London. He recently also redirected the West End production of The Mousetrap at St Martin's Theatre. It's my pleasure to welcome him this evening. Just for some general housekeeping, our chat will last around 40 minutes and then we'll open the floor to questions. So if you've got any burning questions or things to ask Hugh, please pop it in the message in the side of the chat. So hello, Hugh. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you.
Where are you joining us from today?
I'm in Brighton with a bit of a sea breeze.
Yes, we can see in the blinds in the background.
Yes, it is flapping slightly, I'm sorry. Yeah.
So starting out, I mean, just from the introduction, you've had such a varied career. How did you get into acting and directing?
Well, I was very lucky because the school I went to, which was in Glasgow, had, it was called Glasgow Academy, and it had something called the Globe Players. And the Globe Players did a Shakespeare play every year. And I'd done bits and pieces. The first thing that happened actually was they were kind of drama orientated. Because there was a teacher there who did puppets, and we made puppets and did puppet theatre and stuff. And in my, when I was about 8 or 9. Anyhow, then I graduated into the Globe Players, and there was a boys' school, and I was extremely fortunate in retrospect because I started out playing Alice in Henry V. Then I played Gertrude in Hamlet, Portia in The Merchant of Venice. And then suddenly my voice broke and I played Malvolio, Macbeth, and Richard III, all before I was 18, which is actually extraordinary.
Completely.
And extremely, I mean, how blessed was I to have done all that? Didn't realize at the time. But so then I went to university in St Andrews, and then I played Hamlet. So I was kind of immersed in Shakespeare at a very tender age.
Yes. And do you remember having like a teacher or anyone that really inspired you when you were a young age, or was it just?
I had a marvelous teacher director at school called Peter Gannon, who actually not very long ago died, who I kept in touch with. In fact, and his daughters and I are still in touch. He was brilliant and great. And he was it was quite a conservative school. And he was a bit of a renegade, really. He was a bit of a maverick. And I used to, he was married to a singer in a jazz band. And it was a kind of little refuge in Glasgow to go around there at night and have a drink and chat about show business. So that was that. He was a big influence, really.
Absolutely. And from there, obviously, and your studies, how did you get more into the professional world of acting?
Well, I wanted to go to drama school from school, and it was that. And I've subsequently, so many people have the same story. No, you're bright, you need to get something behind you, you have to go to university, blah, blah, blah. Because I got like the hires, they call them in Scotland. And so I went to St Andrews, and of course then started acting at St Andrews, doing lots of acting there, and that's where I played Hamlet. And in my second year, the professor of French there knew my father, and he wrote to my father and said, well, I wish you'd let this boy do what he wants to do instead of wasting our time. So my father said, well, yeah, that's okay, you can do that, but as long as you get enough passes that if ever you want to go back to university to finish your degree, you can. So I left after 2 years, went back home to Glasgow, And after the first time I tried for RADA, I didn't get in. I mean, in those days, people wanted to get out of Scotland. I don't think people do now, and I don't think I would have done today perhaps as much. Anyway, RADA was kind of like RADA, you know. And so I auditioned for them, and I was turned down flat. Probably because I chose pieces that were completely unsuitable. And then the second time I auditioned, I didn't get in and went to RADA. And every time, and it was there, I did my diploma. And if I was ever out of work, my father would say, I think it's time you went back and finished a degree, don't you? And I didn't. So that was that.
And it obviously sounds like you've had a few setbacks, but generally your family to an extent were relatively supportive. And maybe some of the younger audiences that maybe have their own setbacks currently at the
Yes, yes.
Is there any advice that you have for them in terms of kind of keeping with it and powering through?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that tenacity is very important. And the most important thing of all is not to be bitter, because it's A, very ugly, and B, self-defeating. And you do meet actors who get reach a certain age and a kind of bitterness has overtaken them. And I mean, it's hard to be philosophical all the time because sometimes it's a ghastly business, really. My advice would be, if you want to be an actor, no, don't. Do something else. Anyway, I'm on the audition panel at RADA now, so can people come and go and I see them and I think, gosh, and it's so much. I think now it's so oversubscribed. The business, you know, it's because there's no ceiling to the number of people who can be actors. But it's even worse than it was when I started. At least in that, when I started, there was rep to go to learn their trade.
Absolutely. And I guess as someone on the kind of audition panel, is there any advice again that you would give people that maybe are auditioning for Shakespeare or?
Yes, try and please don't do Phoebe from As You Like It. By the time you've finished every season and you've seen 55 Phoebes, you think I'm going to shoot myself, but somebody else said they're going to do Phoebe. No, I mean, no, just it's extraordinary. Some people you think, why are you doing this? And then suddenly somebody comes along, you think, my God, this person's brilliant. So it's a very, you know, we do them in blocks of 15 people, and it's all been online, of course, recently. People send in their tape, and sometimes there are 15, and by the end of the 15, I think, oh, this is just awful, and blah blah blah. There are 3,500 applicants for 28 places. So, and there are various panels kind of sifting them out. So yes, but I was saying actually to Gavin earlier on that I'm not sure how much you can be, how can you be taught to be an actor? I'm not sure that you can. I mean, you have to have some talent to begin with, I think, something. You can get better, practice, but I think it's a bit like carpentry, it's a craft. And if you know, your first chair that you make may be rubbish, but if you do make lots of chairs, by the time you've done lots of chairs, you'll find a way of making the chair work.
And you mentioned, obviously, early on you were a part of the Globe Players, and that gave you a lot of exposure to different Shakespeare roles, female Shakespeare roles, male roles as well. Were there any other experiences you think throughout your career that have really helped shape you as an actor today and made you the actor or producer director that you are?
Well, I think the thing was that having done all that stuff at school and at university, I had a facility, kind of whatever it was, but it was all a bit kind of superficial and everything else. And while I'm sometimes skeptical about training, I have to say that my time at RADA, although they were quite ruthless, I was, you know, you hear these stories, I was sort of broken down and my facility was attacked. And I had a wonderful tutor at RADA called Hugh Ross, who died last year. And I think I was a much better actor for it because it was no longer kind of just performing. I kind of have a way of working now, which is much more exploring. I mean, I don't know what it is, but I mean, I'm a better actor for having been trained.
And having worked across so many different mediums, radio, TV, film, theatre, is there Is there a favorite? Do you find that each is different, or how do you approach each of the mediums?
Well, it's funny because I've been I started doing Outlander in 2018, and and then there was a hiatus, of course, with lockdown and everything. And to begin with, I had very little to do in it, and we called it Now House Bystander. However, the character did eventually develop till he finally died just before Christmas. So I hadn't been on a stage. Usually, up till that point in my life, I think I'd done a play, at least one play a year. So I hadn't done a play since 2017. So then, earlier this year, I was asked to do The Vortex in Chichester. And I thought, ooh, and I was very taken with the director. And I thought, well, I better do it again. So I did it again and realized how much I'd missed it, how much I missed the thing of a group working together, being and it was a very, very happy group. And he was a very, very good director. So it was really nice to be back in the theatre. So I realized that that's the great thing. It's the camaraderie. You don't get that so much in film and TV.
Absolutely. And that sort of camaraderie, what makes a good company in your opinion?
I think I don't know what the word is for this, but I mean, this was a very good company. It's partly also in the Mousetrap, I redirected it 3 times and had 3 different companies. And that was fascinating because you'd have thought, well, you could only do this play one way and blah, blah, blah. Because it was completely different. Whoever was playing the different, I mean, subtly. And there was one in one of the 3 groups, there was somebody who was a bit of a bad apple in the barrel. Yeah. And that's if you have a bad apple in the barrel, it does kind of make a difference. In The Vortex, Leah Williams, who's a fantastically wonderful actress, is a great leader of a company, and so from her leadership, I suppose it sounds a bit naff to say this, but I mean the company just melded because we all supported each other completely. It was great.
Absolutely. And when you're now directing shows, you're producing shows, etc., was there a natural shift in your career where you said, I want to do more of this, or did it almost come about quite organically?
Well, it's funny because I mean, every time I do direct something else happens that I get diverted from directing something else. And I mean, it was tough getting the roundabout together and all of the business. However, there is a play that I've been thinking about for a while that I've sort of discovered. And I'm actually having a meeting on Thursday about possibly trying to get it organized and directing it, but I'm not quite sure. So I mean, like after the roundabout, then Outlander happened. So that was that. So it's kind of I'm creating something to fit Mr. McAvoy. Mr. McAvoy says something always turns up. Well, something might, but it takes you in a different direction sometimes.
Absolutely. So your advice is kind of go with it and see, I guess, where that road takes you.
Try to get experience in as many different areas as you possibly can.
And do you have a sort of list yourself, the sort of roles, theatre you would like to direct, anything like that in your mind, or is it all just depending on what the opportunity comes about?
I'm very obsessed with the speaking of Shakespeare, which I think is needing quite a lot of attention. And I mean, Peter Hall was a great pedant about it in a way, but I mean, he did bat on. There is a way of doing it that doesn't make it sound like it's Russian. And Eileen Atkins did at the Globe the most fantastic one-woman show where she did about Ellen Terry, where she played everything, men, women. It was breathtaking, and it all sounded like it was written today, because she was her use of the language. Whereas often I've seen things recently, Shakespeare productions, often on television, actually have a look at them and turn them off after 5 minutes because people are shouting. They're not. Well, there are kind of various tricks about the language, but actually you think, no, just tell the story. Don't do that shouting, acting stuff. Ranting. They're ranting. Be it.
And is there a particular, I mean, you've obviously mentioned a few there. I mean, is there a person or another actor that you think has really exceeded as a performer? You mentioned Rowan Atkinson and
Rowan? No, I don't think I mentioned Rowan. Eileen Atkins.
I didn't actually, I'm sorry.
No, quite a different kettle of
I
fish.
was going to say that's an interesting play.
Just look her up. She's a genius, Dame Eileen Atkins. Yeah, I'm a great. She was, as I say, this Ellen Terry program is absolutely fantastic. I'm a big fan. I mean, I can't tell you how much I admire Ian McKellen because I just can't. I mean, because I'm not that much younger than he is, but the energy he has, and the fact that he jumps straight in there, and I mean, and I thought that was the other thing about when I was at school. We not only did Shakespeare plays, but there was also at Christmas time they did a pantomime, and we got all sorts of different disciplines by being playing out, you know, that different kind of style of acting. And Ian McKellen's performance as Mother Goose, I thought, was one of the great acting performances that I've ever seen.
Yeah, I went to go see that as well this Christmas, and I think we were all blown away
It was fantastic, absolutely fantastic.
The variety.
Yeah.
Seeing him as well in Windsor as the kind of playing Hamlet, you know, just coming out of COVID. And
did you see that?
yes, and just the versatility of him, and you know, that sort of fearlessness to jump into a role and say, okay, we're going to go with this production and really seize the moment and not be afraid of it, I think is really notable to do that, and he's definitely one that I think we all look up to.
I mean, I just think as a kind of attitude to life, it's just so fantastic. There's a positive life force in these dark days, and it's great. Yeah,
absolutely. And where is your favorite play? We're sort of segueing a little bit now into Shakespeare. Do you have a favorite place to watch it? Is there a theatre that's sort of cool to you that?
Well, I'm a big fan of Cheap. I did some work with Cheap by Jowl, who I love working with Declan Donlan years ago now. But he's kind of gone. He's on the continent maybe and doesn't do very much work here. I enjoyed the way he worked very much. Yeah. I'm very Daniel Evans, who was there to, you know, who's taking over the RSC. Very optimistic that he will make some great changes there. Very good. I'm quite keen. One of the things about Cheap by Jowl was that when I first saw them, they were very sort of miniature. One of the best productions of Shakespeare I've ever seen was Ian McKellen and Judi Dench's Scottish play, which you can still get on DVD, I think, which is fantastic. And that's interesting from the point of view of what we were talking about making it sound like it's new minted, like the language. When you watch that, they are both completely new minted, the way they use the language. But there's some other actors in it who are kind of dated, because they're acting in a completely different style, and that's quite revealing of them. So I saw a very interesting production of Measure for Measure done by 5 actors. I think that's quite an interesting concept, trying to do a pocket Shakespeare with 5 actors just playing the play. Audiences love that. Audiences love seeing actors playing different parts. They love. That's one of the things they loved about repertoire, which they don't get anymore.
And I guess it's the sort of the show of a great actor to show that versatility and be able to come out of one scene and catapult yourself into another and one headspace and move into another space.
Another thing of saying you can only be an Outlander if you're Scottish or whatever it might be. You know what I mean? That's it's ridiculous, really, because acting is acting, isn't it? It's something else.
And when you're approaching Shakespeare, how would you tackle a new role in a new production? I mean, how do you what is your process coming up to rehearsal day one?
Well, I'd read it a lot, and probably I'd probably read it and probably say it quietly to myself. Great. I mean, I would have to be. The thing about your 60-hour Shakespeare that would terrify me is the thing of the speed of it. Because there's a kind of thing, I think, with Shakespeare that you learn the words. There's a kind of what's the word? Fermented. That's to ferment in your brain. So that I can remember when I was learning Shakespeare, and I used to chant to them going along the street, the various, and then you kind of just kind of exploring the language and finding it becoming part of yourself. Does that sound very pretentious?
No, I think it's the stewing of Shakespeare. I think
like stewing is the word. I mean, and that it has to stew, and that's what worries me about 60-hour Shakespeare. There's no stewing time.
But I think the idea is that they are obviously they're reading the lines, and it's very real. There isn't the time to stew over, this actor that's just been killed, your father's, or something. And I think what we wanted to do, having seen so many different productions of Shakespeare, is kind of bring that organic and reactive and very live component to it. And arguably, yes, you will lose the stew time, the boil time, but I think every actor coming into the play has got their lines. They've almost rehearsed their own individual part, and then it's all it's all go. All bets are off when you're actually then in the rehearsal process, and you don't know that your co-actor may have rehearsed something in a completely different way. He might come in and slap you in the face, and you don't know. So, but it's been interesting hearing from different actors and producers and directors like yourself, and finding how the process changed, and I guess the level of taking people out of their comfort zone. And that's one thing that we always get from the end of our productions is, wow, I didn't know I could do that, or I didn't know you could do a production in 60 hours. I think they're always quite surprised at their own internal capacity.
Well, it seems there's a bit of a thing at the minute, because I mean, I'd love to have seen the thing that Ruth Wilson just did, the Young Vic, where you lined up, and then you got on, you improvised a scene or played a scene with them. I think that's really interesting. I mean,
there's definitely, I think, a trend towards this kind of immersive production. You've got to be in an AV filled room with 20 actors on the fly, and you don't know if they're also audience members, etc. I mean, obviously you've been part of the industry, having seen different productions, different shows. I mean, are there any thoughts that you have on the future of productions or theatre and film?
No, not. I mean, I think theatre. Sometimes I go and see things, and I think, I wish this director would go and make a film, actually, because they're so busy getting a soundscape and making it rain or whatever it might be. I want to see the play, But then you'd say that, no, God, he's so old-fashioned, saying the boring old fart that it's talking about that. But I mean, I'm, as I said, trying to keep a very open mind about all these things. And I was telling a story to Gavin earlier on about sorry, this may have slightly got off the tangent, but about going to see The Inheritance, which was, I thought, a very fine play, which I saw the Young Vic, then transferred to the Old Guard. And I knew Stephen Daldry a bit, and he was outside the theatre the second time I saw him. And I said to him, I really, really think this is a marvelous production. He said, thank you. Why do you think that? And I said, well, because basically it's an almost empty stage, and the actors with a very, very fine script, and the actors are just being allowed to play the scenes together and being sense, and it's just doing the play. And he said, Hugh, have you seen my production of Inspector Calls? I said, yes. And he said, that's what a young director does. And you sort of think, well, yeah, when you're a young director, you have to hoist the flag up and make a lot of noise. And so that's sort of quite revealing. I mean, it's like, the empty space, Peter Brook, you come back to nothing but the empty space and the actor. Yeah.
And I guess, on that now, I mean, are there any roles, we've talked about shows that you might want to direct, etc., but particularly within Shakespeare, is there a role that you feel you've just been dying to play but haven't played it yet?
No, I don't. I mean, there was once wonderful, a huge company, a reputable company. My agent rang up and said, "Do you want to play King Lear?" And I said, yeah, "I'd be terrified, but yeah, of course I would like to play King Lear." And it turned out that it was a mistake, and in fact, the director wanted me to play Gloucester, which I'd already played. and somebody else was thinking. So that was kind of a funny moment in my life. I've been terrified about King Lear, but that's good fun. King Lear and Prosper, I suppose. But then I'm getting on a bit now. But then Ian McKellen makes you think, well, you can probably do it at 90 with determination in that. I don't know.
I think the norms of everything is sort of being turned on their head, and it's interesting that it does provide a fresh perspective. You know, gender switching has always been kind of popular, but there's.
I have a kind of, I mean, I've only understudied once in my life, which was Alan Howard's Richard II.
Oh.
At Stratford. And he'd never ever been on. And one day he was off. I had a call at lunchtime, you're on tonight. Fortunately, I was very prepared. I mean, I learned it. And I went on, and it went really well. Thanks mainly, I have to say, to his dresser.
Oh, I'm
He
sure.
kind of knew exactly where to guide me or put me, but she was a huge help. She was called Cynthia. Anyway, and it was like being, you know, 42nd Street, you go out to nobody and come back. It was like being in 42nd Street without the payoff. It was back to playing Ross and Willoughby or Ross or Willoughby coming over the next day. However, that was thrilling, and I've always kind of, when the Kenneth played Hamlet, I thought maybe somebody would let me play Richard II, because I still want to do it.
We'll call you when we do the revival. We did actually Richard II over.
Oh, would you?
But we didn't do it in the flesh, so we're going to give you a call. Hopefully, you'll come and play it for us.
Oh, I'd love to do that. I mean, I just love Richard II. I think it's marvelous. That's another interesting. Sorry, again, off at a tangent. Interesting thing I find about young actors not being very interested in the past or history. And one day on the audition, found that rather when we were in the room with somebody, this guy came and did Richard II, and I thought, yeah. I said, have you seen it? And he said, oh yes. He said, I saw David Tennant. It was fantastic. And I said, oh, that's great. I said, in my day, the great Richard II was John Gielgud. And he said, sorry? I said, John Gielgud? No, sorry, I've never heard of it. And I said, look, in Shaftesbury Avenue, there's a theatre called the Gielgud. And I said, there's also in this building a theatre called the Gielgud. Promise me when you leave here, you will look him up on Google and do research. I mean, because he was, but it's kind of like, no, we'll move on and go play another video game. You know, there's no kind of
connection to the past. And
I don't know what that's about. I think it's strange.
I think it's a big question in the forms that people now consume content and get access to information. And sadly, you know, in some instances, I think that, you know, going to a library, renting a book, reading up on it, watching, you know, an archive. And I think it's interesting now for theatre companies. I mean, we've seen it with the National Theatre, and, you know, they're having to explore new ways to bring their content and their shows not only to the existing audience during COVID when no one could go, but also the future audience is entertainment in a completely different way. And it's really sad, because I had a conversation with someone and they were saying, oh, well, 3 hours is a long time for a play, you know, and you think, no, but you have to sit with the characters, you have to live with them, you can't do it in a 10-second TikTok video. But an interesting observation, I guess, but for the younger audience, you know, it's not enough probably just to go into an audition with your monologue or your 3 lines. You have to have probably done your homework, be prepared to talk about it.
Yeah. You see, and that's interesting too. I went to see A Little Life, and it hasn't particularly rung my bell, but I was amazed at how many young people were there, and how many young people sat through nearly 4 hours, fairly rapt by it, and obviously were very moved by it. It's quite an interesting phenomenon, that whole thing with Little Life. That's
it's a big book. I remember the book, carrying it around while I was reading it. But you know, and there was it Angels in America that had an intermission, and you had Harry Potter and the Cursed Child that also had an.
Yes, you see, people are prepared to do that, aren't they? Lap up 2 parts of Harry Potter.
Yeah, absolutely. With it, maybe just having a comfort break in the middle of it.
Yeah.
But in terms of, I mean, you've mentioned a few sort of theatre companies that you loved working with. Is there anyone else in the space that's doing anything really exciting for you that you think, wow, this is something I'd love to be part of, or I might even take on board for my own production company?
No, I don't. I mean, I have to say that I'm rather, go back to a little life. I thought that Eva Van Hove does extraordinary things, and not always. I haven't thought they were all fantastic, but I did think like View from the Bridge very much, and also I thought Network was good. And Daniel Raggett, who directed The Vortex, had worked with him. And I just think he's very bold, but sort of, I think it sounds exciting. Have a go. Yeah.
And how much of the production do you think, you know, obviously there's an element of being prepared when you come into it, knowing where it's going to be set, the frames. How much of that do you find kind of evolves when you're on the set? And does it have a place? Do shows need to have that kind of place to evolve within the rehearsal room?
No, I think they need to be sort of fluid. And I mean, you know, it's, and actually you have to, I mean, your performance is going to vary very much depending on who you're playing a scene with. Yeah. And you know, if you play with a really, really fine actor, like I worked a couple of times with Fiona Shaw, and I always felt like my game was completely raised because she was so powerful that you had to, you know, be on the front foot, and that's exciting. So it's not kind of the same old thing every night. There's something a bit different. Yeah. And it was nice. It was nice in The Vortex. There's one good. I played Lawrence's husband, which is on the page, not a big part, but there's a wonderful scene in it. And me and Joshua James, who played my son, there was a lovely feeling that we took a lot of time in it, and it was actually very organic and varied a bit. And I think that's also what's nice about the theatre, is that things vary. You never, you know, nothing's all cliche, but nothing is the same every night. Yeah.
I guess you have to have that trust with your
So you can't come with your performance all, you know, I'm going to do this, you know, because that's not the way it's going to be. It's going to change depending on who you're doing it with. And you can work with ghastly directors and say, what are you doing? Which of course is the absolutely first step to you being paralyzed and unable to do anything.
Have you ever had to sort of, I mean, it sounds like there may have been an instance there, but, you know, again, advice for actors and the audience that, you know, maybe working with a challenging director or working against their gut or intuition on a certain role or the direction it's going.
Yeah, yes, you have to somehow come from, I mean, I think that there was a sort of dictatorial phase where there were a lot of directors. I remember when the National, when Olivia was running it, they used to say about John Dexter and William Gaskell. Nobody will know who they are, but they were both very distinguished directors. But John Dexter was apparently absolutely terrifying to work with. And I'm not sure how you find your way through that. It can be so upsetting. And to feel that you're kind of not pleasing somebody, because actors fundamentally want to please people. You know, they kind of please Sam, you know, pat me on the head and tell me everything. That was when I started doing the odd directing thing. At the first read through, you come to these little faces, 12 little faces looking up at you, thinking, saying, "Can you look after me? Will you help? I get lost? Will you help me out of this situation?" There's a sort of
happy eyes.
Yeah, you know what I mean. They want trust,
guidance, and the trust, and then I think within that space, that comfort area, they're comforted then to be able to do or of their intuition. And I guess that's the role of a good director and company, is to make space, make that safe space so that you can then grow with the rest of your cast in that.
There's a wonderful, I'm always quoting this, and there's a wonderful book which has never been out of print by Moss Hart, an American writer director, called Act One. And in it, one of the lines that I'm always quoting to people is, the director should be a custodian of the proceedings on the stage and not the star of them. So that was basically, that's what my reaction against. It's about collaborating. And what's nice about theatre is when it's a collaborative effort.
Hmm.
You know?
Yeah, I think we've got. I'm furiously taking notes myself, but that's approach our so we'll be doing Othello and also Queen Margaret. Do you have any advice on us embarking into this production? I know that obviously the 60-hour thing, we've committed to that, we can't change it, but any advice approaching those roles, approaching the speech in the play, etc.?
I mean, how extensive are your audition? Have you cast everything? And
yes, yeah. So
I mean, how many applicants do you have? Hundreds?
Yeah, actually, I mean, I think, you know, particularly post-COVID, I mean, we've had so much interest, I think, even globally, people wanting to fly in to be part of our productions.
That's
and
fantastic. Yeah.
Have our wonderful casts as well that have, you know, said, oh, I loved the show last year and I want to come back on this. But, you know, each time, and I think the great thing is through building this network that we had over the quarantine time, we have this wonderful resource group and everyone's provided wonderful advice, feedback, thoughts. So again, just any thoughts and advice for us approaching this?
No, it sounds to me like you've kind of got it all pretty much sussed out, because I mean, and the other thing, of course, is that casting is a huge part of it. And if you've cast cleverly, then the job's, you know, 75%, 80% done, I think. And I'm sure you have cast carefully. No, actually, I've had a look at some of your things and think, yes, that's very good casting.
The other 25% though, any tips?
No, I think I don't know what I'd say to that. I think just be very quietly, perhaps go back to the text with them and try and help them to. Is that what you're saying? People that aren't on top of what they're trying to do. Is that what you're asking me? Sorry.
Yeah, no, it was just more kind of going into any production. I know you said that there's some productions that you've seen that have been very shouty, or they're not over, they're not, the delivery isn't there. So I guess actually, I think
quite a good trick is actually sometimes. I did a production with a very, very good director called Tim Aubrey years ago. I don't know what's happened to him. Anyway, of Mary Stuart and by Schiller, and we were in the much late lamented Greenwich Theatre, which was a very good producing theatre then. And just before we opened, he said, "I think today we'll just whisper the whole play." And he said, if you don't understand what somebody's saying, say, "What?" It's a great trick, actually, because you know, people were saying things without automatically.
And they listen. They really listen. They have to listen.
Yes.
Maybe we should do that in time.
So I think that's a good one to have up your sleeve.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, I think that's a good one. Even just taking scenes and trying that.
Yeah.
I'm conscious we're coming to the end. We've got some questions I think that are coming through. I think I wouldn't be forgiven if I wasn't able to go into a little bit more of Outlander though before we get on to that. I know we've got a lot of Outlander fans here.
Yeah.
A joy to work on.
Absolute magic. They are. Katrina Balfe and Sam Hewen. I mean, what I was saying about being company leaders, they are great. It's a very, very, I was so lucky to get the job. And the atmosphere is great, the locations are great, the production team is great. The whole thing about it is, it was a marvelous, marvelous job. What else can I tell you? And I mean, yeah, as I say, it took the character I was playing a long time to kind of come into center of the frame, but in this series, there's much more to do. I'm probably not allowed to say that.
Was there anything that was a happy accident that became part of the plot, which actually maybe was only rehearsed, or something that wasn't scripted, and then during the process you sort of thought, actually this works, we're gonna go with this?
No, I mean, there were all sorts of challenging things, like there was a very, very big sequence, and it was the wettest day. I've never been so cold or so wet in my life. But and then the thing is that the cameras now can film in that, and where it still looks okay. No, I don't think it's anything. I don't think it was anything particularly. No, not really. No, as I say, it was a very happy job.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm so. With the rules of confidentiality are so extreme.
Of course, yeah.
Otherwise, I would tell you all sorts of other things. But all I can say is it's a lovely job and a lovely unit. And yes, they're all very nice people.
And this is more of a fun one, given that you've worked with so many actors across so many different projects. If you could have a desert island dinner with 3 of them, who would you invite?
Well, number 1 would be Meryl Streep, because there were 35 of us playing her cabinet ministers in The Iron Lady, known as her moths. She called them her moths. Right. And she was just such good fun, and absolutely no side to her whatsoever. And when she won her BAFTA, she said, "First of all, I'd like to thank my moths."
We were watching it going, what is she talking about?
Exactly. We knew. And you just have to look at her career to realize that she's just, she's a goddess, isn't she? And I think Kate Blanchett is another goddess. I had 2 days with her, just me and her, on this funny little scene in Charlotte Gray as her psychiatrist. But we got on really well, and she's a great lover of the theatre. And I was doing a play shortly after that, I think it was. Oh no, I was doing it, I think, at the time, called Pyrenees by a marvelous writer called David Gray. And we talked about it, and at the chocolate factory, the Menier chocolate factory in London. And we finished the filming, and one night I arrived at the theatre, and there she was with her husband, come to see it, which I thought was beyond the call of duty, and just, really nice.
Or if you invited her to a desert island, she would come in a speedboat.
And then we'd have Harrison Ford as well, because he was good fun.
Oh, of course. What a great movie to be part of.
So I think the 4 of us would have a nice dinner, don't you think?
Yeah, definitely. Harrison was obviously Indiana Jones, so I think he would fare in the desert climate.
Yeah.
Let me have a quick look, because I think we have some exciting questions which are coming through. So let me see. Okay, so we have Mariana has asked, hello, as an actor currently at drama school, I'd love to hear about your first memory of your first big audition.
Golly. Oh, okay. I auditioned. There was an all-male production of As You Like It that when Olivier ran the National Theatre, once Olivier ran the National Theatre, he didn't direct this production, which was marvelous, actually. And then it was going to go to America. And I wasn't long out of drama school, and they asked if I'd come and audition for Rosalind. I thought, yeah, that's good. And the deal was you had to do a classical piece. And I chose a piece from a Jacobean play. I was terribly excited about doing an audition for Laurence Olivier. And I did this thing from a play called The Malcontent. And it was all, and at the end of it, Laurence Olivier just looked at me and said, it was about this man who kills himself because he's been usurped and betrayed by a woman. And he looked at me and said, a tremendous amount of usurping going on. And that was the end of it. It was kind of, didn't get the job. That was a big audition, which I didn't get. But these things happen.
And then we've got another question that's come in from Kathy. It's clear you value interacting with young actors. I run the fan group for Caitlin O'Ryan, and she mentioned you often. I just want to say thank you for all your lovely support of her.
Oh, we got on very, very well. She was in the first in series 5. She and John Tarsi, the 3 of us were a little trio. We ate. We did lots of things together. Still see each other.
And I guess on the, well, maybe going back for the first question is advice. Is there anyone that you go to for advice now, or maybe earlier in your career, a mentor?
Well, there's an elderly director who I've known, who's in his 80s actually, who, when I was asked to do the Vortex, and I always, because he knows everything, he knows every play that was ever written, and I wasn't sure about the part in the Vortex, and I rang him up and said, I've been asked to do this, do you think I should do it? And he said, oh yes, he said, it's a marvelous part, blah, blah, blah. So yes, there is now, and if he, long may he last, because he's very good person to go to and ask advice from.
Amazing. And we've got a few other questions coming in. Hugh, you mentioned that there might be a particular way of speaking Shakespeare's speeches. Could you please elaborate on that?
Fundamentally, oh God, this is would be a lecture. But basically, the line ending, all the world's a stage, and all the men and women merely players. The last word in the line is usually the one that holds the sense. And if you speak the line to the last word of the line, you'll probably not go too far wrong. Does that help? That's my little tiny secret thing. I mean, it's straightforward.
I hope everyone was taking notes of that. I think they were.
If you just say that to all the world's a stage, and all the men and women merely players. So the sense is clear, isn't it? And lots of people use too many words and do it. I mean, 2 hours traffic at the stage, they spoke much more quickly. Yeah. Okay,
well, I'll try and read this one a bit quicker. Having spoken about past performances such as Gilgood's, which is your favorite Shakespeare performance of all time?
Oh golly. Oh my goodness me. Maggie Smith went to Canada. She had a funny little phase in her career. Her marriage, I think, ended. And she went to Canada to work with a director called Robin Phillips. And a friend of mine who I'd been working with in Rep ran the festival at Stratford, Ontario, Shakespeare Festival. And Maggie Smith played Rosalind. And it was heart-stoppingly brilliant. And not at all, you know, like you imagine Maggie Smith being all kind of camp and everything. It was so tender sometimes and so funny. I think it was one of the great performances I've ever seen.
I've got another one here. Hello, Hugh. As a director, I would like to know the biggest lesson you have ever learned from directing.
I think what I said earlier, that everybody works in a different way. So there's no theory. You can't say everybody has a different way of getting to their performance, and you have to somehow intuit what way they want to go. And if you impose something else on them, you may well map them up. If you see what I mean.
And if you could have an audience with Shakespeare for 10 minutes, is there any burning question you would ask him?
I think just ask him if I could be in his company and play a few, you know, just I'd like to do a season with Shakespeare in his globe.
Absolutely. And we've got another one. Let's see. Hi, Hugh. What have you learned as an actor that you have brought to your directing?
Listen and respond and find the truth. Does that make any sense?
I can see the hypothetical heads nodding. Yes, I think it's it's yes, it's understanding that I guess it's a process and that you got to
That's
listen.
what I mean when I say that, your performance will vary depending on who you're playing a scene with, because if you're listening properly and they bat the ball in a different way, of course you bat it back into it. It's like tennis. You know? And that's what it's what I mean about a craft, a skill.
And do you think it makes you obviously a better director, having come from an acting background and having that connection? Because you've obviously infused acting throughout your career, whereas I think some may have just gone through acting and then become more purely directors. Do you think it's good to have that balance throughout?
I think, yeah. I mean, I think a lot of people who've done that, like Kenneth Branagh, have done, and I mean, what a wonderful career that is, isn't it? It's about taking, to have directed all those wonderful things, and yeah, if you can do them both and balance them both out, then you're very lucky. Not everybody can. You know what I mean? It's, and I think one does feed the other, but I mean that would be a different sort of play to kind of the immersive stuff we're talking about as well. You know what I mean? It wouldn't be that, would it?
Well, obviously there's still more questions I think coming through. We've got, hi Hugh, what's the best note you've ever been given by a director?
Be still. Stillness is so powerful. Yeah.
And out of the shows and everything that you've been on, has there been anything quite dramatic or unexpected, perhaps a funny story or anecdotal story from your experience, maybe more in the film and television side?
Oh golly. Then I'm sure there must be lots of. I don't think I can't immediately think of something. It was something we did. We
got an NDA, so you can't share.
But NDA, yes, quite. No, I mean, I did do a series called a very famous book called The Mists of Avalon, which Americans love, and Arthurian legend and all that stuff. And it was also not very, very. I do have a lot of fun from time to time. It was in Prague for 3 months, and it wasn't particularly funny at the time, but somebody just sent me a clip from it. And when I saw what I had in my head, I thought, no wonder this was a terrible disaster. That looked so absolutely ridiculous. And in fact, my partner called it the Mists of Mogadon because it was so slow and so turgid. That's not very funny. But anyway, it's like the hat suddenly came back to me. How embarrassing it was.
Do you often watch some of your shows or performances back? Have you watched The Patriot? Have you?
Well, Patriot Games is on all the time, and I mean that scene. I can watch that scene quite. Some things I hate watching, and I never watch sort of immediately because too dramatic sometimes.
So if it's just on the TV, you flick through, you go, oh yes, this is a memory. Oh, there's
Well, sometimes you look and think, oh, I must look at that, and then you think, actually, it wasn't that bad.
yes.
You know, oh gosh, that was better than I thought it was. Yeah.
And do you, I guess on that note of sort of coming out of a show or production or filming and sort of feeling, oh God, that was really awful. And I think there's a lot in the moment around kind of imposter syndrome, kind of mental health factors as well. Like, do you feel that ever at times? And is there a way that you deal with, with that if you do?
What do you mean that I'm you being an imposter? Sorry, I don't quite know. Ask me.
I meant it more probably maybe earlier in your career. I think there is a moment when you come out of a show and you go, oh, gosh, that was really rubbish, or
Yeah.
why did they cast me? This is not my role. And
I immediately, you see, and it's 40 years ago. Henry VIII in A Man for All Seasons at Liverpool Playhouse. I was dreadful, and I knew I was dreadful. But if you know what I mean, and I think that's still thinking, oh God, I was dreadful.
Do you think was that just you at the time, or I'm sure it probably wasn't that?
People were polite, but I mean, it was not very good.
Oh gosh, there's more questions. Thank you for sharing all your experience, Hugh. Did your career play out in the way you had imagined at the beginning? Is there anything you would have done differently? Oh gosh, wow, that's a big question.
I don't think so. There are a couple of directors who I arrogantly didn't accept their offers from, but I think it might have been a better idea if I had accepted their offers from. And I mean, it's so much chance, and you don't know quite what's going to happen. But I mean, and you think, well, if I'd done that, would that have happened? But actually, wasting any energy thinking like that is absolutely ridiculous, because it's happened, it's done.
Mm-hmm.
And you think you can speculate and say, gosh, I should have done that with him. I did think that very recently about a very distinguished director came to see The Vortex. And I thought, I've never worked with you, and I bet it's because I didn't agree to do X. Yeah.
The Mousetrap is such an iconic long-running play. I'm curious about what kind of differences there were in your 3 redirects of this play.
Well, that was what I was saying earlier on. It depended absolutely on the casting. The different people brought different things, and I tried to get away with kind of as much as possible the kind of stereotyped way of playing it. I mean, I didn't change very much, but I wanted. But all when I think back on them, they were all different, which was really surprising. You know, do you think, oh, it's the same play, but yet it's quite different, because as Sondheim said, whatever you do, if it's from you, it will be new. So whoever you cast will bring something new to it.
Absolutely. I guess be yourself in that, and you know,
the
reason for that role. So don't pretend to be anyone that you are.
That's why Hamlet is infinitely, and Hamlet's never boring, because whoever is playing Hamlet will bring something quite different to him.
Absolutely. And I think, unfortunately, we're coming to a close, but as I said, it was an education session at the beginning. I think it would be nice to set our audience members some homework. I know you mentioned about, you know, researching the history, that there are some performances that have really stood out for you. I know that books are available, videos are available, DVDs. I think we were talking about before and earlier. You know, are there any performances, books, things that you say you absolutely must read, listen to, watch, etc., that we can assign our audience?
I think, well, I know that there's somebody once showed me an RSC DVD of various people playing Hamlet. And David Warner, who died last year, was a wonderful actor. His was dead modern. And, you know, it was 50 years ago, 60 years ago. And some of the other, there's various other performances, not just Hamlet. But that's a very good, different styles of acting that come, some of, you know, not too big, and some of, you know, but he was like, you know, to be or not to be, that's the question, being real. Yeah.
And we'll watch that. Now, I know the audience will be keen to know what you're working on, where they can see you. Is there anything coming up that we should keep our eyes out for?
Well, only Outlander Series 7, which starts coming out on Friday, I think it is. On whatever platform. We've got a new, Lionsgate it's called now. I think you can also watch it on Amazon.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much, Hugh, for your time. I feel like we've covered so much, and you were so wonderful in sharing, you know, all of your thoughts, expertise, and experiences across your own and very.
Let's come and see one of your shows.
Yes. Well, we're going to cast you next year in Richard II. So.
Okay, fine. Oh, that's fine. Okay, good.
Take that call. Just a reminder to the audience, so we've got a few more exciting things coming up on the schedule for 60 Hour Shakespeare. We have our first and only Shakespeare Slam, which will see ex-cast members compete it out on the stage at the Theatre Deli in London and perform some of their favourite soliloquies, monologues, etc. That's on the 16th at Theatre Deli in London. We also have Othello, which will be on the 13th of August at the Abbey Ruins in Reading. And then ending the season, we'll have Queen Margaret on the 28th of August in Leamington Spa. Please let us know in comments, anything, more things that you'd like to see. We've really enjoyed doing these series. So again, just any feedback would be brilliant. Make sure to follow us on the socials. I think there's links below. And finally, you know, the reason that we're all doing this is to raise money for charity. We appointed the wonderful Helping Hands, and there's still time to donate. So if you would like to donate towards this interview and you haven't already, or come and see some of our shows, please just go through on Eventbrite and make your donation. Hugh, thank you so much for your time, and looking forward to Outlander.
Okay, thanks very much indeed.
Thank you so much.
Bye.